right, and we're recording. Okay, so hello everybody. Today is July the 8th. We are having our public forum at a bit of a different time. We had some personal things that needed to take precedence, so we had to shift it to a later date and time. Well, not date, but time. But I'm sure this works for the people who are here right now. As always, we're recording this for future reference and for people who weren't able to be here. So please be mindful of that. Everything you're saying is being recorded. So let's just show a little bit of courtesy to each other. This conversation is going to be it's going to be longer than we have time for right now. So I want to make sure that you all understand that we need to end in about an hour or so. But we're not trying to shut down feedback. We're not trying to shut down conversation. We want to answer as many questions as we can, and we want to get a good sense for where the player base is at. Uh, I have a brief kind of general outline of where I expect this conversation to go. So let me just share that with you right now. So basically, what we want to do is we want to talk about um, what we put on the test server prior to the event starting, what the player base told us about what we put on the test server, how we responded to that, right? What we did with the feedback, and what our final goals are. It's kind of a four-step process, and I think we can get through that in a way that is both informative for you and also enlightening for us, so that we have a better understanding as to what our stakeholders want. Does anyone have any questions before we start?
Can I ask a general deep meta question?
Why not?
I have been told repeatedly by various people that this process began with rebalancing Tech 22 and adjusting everything else accordingly. My understanding of that was that the dev team fundamentally presumed the existing power scale of the game was correct, and they simply need to push the whole thing downward. First, is my understanding of that statement correct? And second, why was this the starting point, not perhaps a different starting point?
Let me just take it. So real quick, that kind of no and no. I think the starting point of this project is actually much more basic, which is um, greater than 100% efficiency heals are not a good mechanic for the game, and we're trying to envision a system where that doesn't exist anymore. So something like one-to-one healing is really going to be where this project started. Adding to that, the observation that the drone ops augmod as it works on live isn't really something that we're that happy with. We've gone over the years trying to figure out how can we bring engineers more into the rest of the itemization system of the game. Our iteration of what drone ops does on the test server is what we came up with. So it's not about what you were saying at all. It's really just trying to identify core mechanics that we think should be improved and re-envisioned. So
Okay.
maybe
Yeah, I can post actually.
yeah.
I was gonna. So I might. That might be the place to start.
Oh,
I,
one other thing, Hober, I want to make sure, because like the way you outline that, which is I think a really good way to summarize what we're going to do here, we definitely want to feedback to the community um, how things have been going, like from our perspective, what we've been doing. But this is not envisioned as a meeting where we just tell you a bunch of stuff. So it should go without saying there
oh
should be plenty
yes.
of opportunities for the folks who are here to kind of chip in your own personal perspective on how things have gone. Maybe you have a different impression about what we've been doing, or you feel like we've been blind to something. Uh, we're here because we do want to have a full conversation, not just tell you some facts about us. But go ahead, Hober.
Sure. So the two things that I've just posted in the healing revamp discussion updated are a part of the broader set of reasons why we're going down the path that we're going down. We got to this point mainly because we wanted to make sure that healing was one-to-one, that you did not manufacture shields out of thin air. I think like I could go for a very long time explaining why we came to that conclusion, but the general gist of it is that it makes it really difficult to scale things and to balance things in a way that allows us to make newer content without completely ballooning damage numbers at the end of the game, at the end game. The second kind of connects to that actually. It's a part of the first, which is that there's a lot of resistance creep and there are a lot of ballooning damage numbers at the end game. So there's a lot of, if you look on live right now, ships as they get higher in tech level have higher and higher resistances. This doesn't just affect incoming damage; it also affects incoming healing. And then because there are all these other multipliers that factor in, you get situations where um, you could be effectively immortal against older content. And so there was an arms race between the devs that made the content and the devs that designed the encounters, which is like, as I noted here, pretty funny because those two groups tended to be the same. And so the meta has kind of coalesced around this idea of like how much shields can the squad manufacture, right? And so a lot of our decisions and a lot of the things that we've done on the test server have come as a result of how do we preserve this idea and this core um, belief, this core concept of healing being a one-to-one thing. And there's also some things that came about as a result of drone ops and how drone ops works on live and the ways in which it multiplies with each other. There's math involved in that. I'm sure Ink could explain that if he wanted to. But the gist of it is that everyone understands that drone ops as it is on lives allows for some very high values. And it's hard to think about how to give people upgrades when giving somebody 2, 3, 4, or 5% more drone ops in a particular stat or offensive ops or whatever can really tilt things in one direction or another. So we're trying to move away from really, really hard scaling that is difficult to create new content for to something that's sustainable in the long term. Now, again, don't want to be talking the entire time. I really do mean it, and Ink really does mean it when we say that this is about a player conversation with the devs, and this is not just a talking at the players situation. So, Spirit, you're asking, would it be possible to get to be able to manufacture shields out of thin air in return for getting reduced incoming heals?
I'm thinking if you reduce the amount of incoming heals, could you make it so that you can more or less manufacture shields, but you can't receive enough healing to where two people can cross heal and manufacture shields like that?
So, I
Can
mean, go ahead.
one thing is we do have a mechanism for manufacturing shields. It's shield regeneration, right? That is how you get more shields. So my my sense of things, in spite of all the bumps in the road, like um, just balance not being the way we want it at the moment on the test server. In spite of all that, I don't think that the one-to-one healing is actually creating problems. I think that what you all are seeing when it comes to shields and healing is we started with the one-to-one thing, and then we tried to create systems around it to kind of ripple out from there and get everything to work because it is a big change to the meta. So that's why we're seeing such much more shield bank. Um, Armor stats. We're seeing much higher shield regen. All these things are like being introduced in an attempt to make the fundamental change of one-to-one healing work. Uh, and I'm not claiming that we got the balance right on all those little pieces, but the reason those pieces are there is that they're what we kind of came up with as a way to make the one-to-one healing change like possible to do in the game.
Yeah, one way I like to think about it is that we're kind of like looking at a house. We're trying to like figure out how do we make this house better? Or we want to renovate the house. And as we're, you know, changing walls and opening things up and like not upgrading it, but trying to upgrade it, we're realizing there's like severe like foundational damage. And so the little changes that we started off making and thinking were enough ended up like showing that there were some core issues that we had been ignoring for a while, which is why you see this like cascading um, intensity of changes, right? As we've gone on, we've made more and more intense changes in an effort to figure out why things weren't landing exactly where we wanted them to for the player experience, that is.
And I want to emphasize, uh, if if we become aware, or maybe the players give us some feedback and it helps us understand that some of those cascading changes are not necessary and we can do without them, then we'll do without them in a moment. So, for example, what we've put on test server now, and when we're ready, we're gonna invite further player feedback and testing. We took off the regen stat from Zen of Shields. It was on there originally, but what we're now thinking is, maybe we can simplify matters. We don't need to be having shield regeneration scaling with this skill. And we're going to overall make Zen of Shielding much less powerful and give the shields themselves that bonus. So this way, the change is a little bit less severe, right? There's not this whole like rush to max Zen of Shields first thing. And just in other examples as well, if we are able to find a way to not cascade the changes as much and deliver a slimmer product that still has that core functionality, we'll make that choice every time. We just maybe need to get the right kind of feedback so we can see the way through.
Can I give feedback on that particular change, please?
Sure.
I did some testing on test 1. I know I'm not supposed to, but I wanted to check because I was deeply concerned. Because of the increased shields, several low-level ships, particularly those with the Argon Wall Shield, are functionally unkillable. Because
are we talking about AI that you're fighting?
Yes, several of the my concern with this change was always that because AI used the same shields players do, this would make certain AI, so strong that by the time you get them to even half their shield bank, you're out of energy, and by the time you regen your energy, their shield bank is coming back again.
Okay, Ren, listen. Point taken. As soon as we open up the testing event again, AI feedback is the channel to put that in, and we'll nerf the AI. As simple as that. So we understand as we make changes, some AI are no doubt going to get underpowered, some are going to get overpowered, and we are more than happy to adjust the power of those AI. But if it's a change that we feel is necessary in order to achieve the underlying goal of the class rebalance, the healing rebalance, we're going to make the change and then solve the AI balance issues. We're not going to just scrap the change because we're worried about balancing AI. So are we getting more text? I'm not able to look at the screen right now.
No, it's fine. Don't worry. I'm just giving people a moment to.
Okay.
Yeah. Just wanted to give people a moment. I'm more than willing to continue on, but I'm not really trying to do too much talking. I know I have a tendency to dominate the conversation. So if you all want, I can start to talk about the what we put on the test server and what we changed as a result of player feedback.
That sounds good.
Yeah. So the first iteration of the test server had a couple of things. It had change for most ships. Almost every ship now has armor instead of having resistances at varying levels. We haven't fully converted from resistances to armor and everything. That is a work in progress. Most ships now have specific, like there's some hull space and size and speed changes. Those are to be decided on an individual basis, right? Like those things can be adjusted at any time based on feedback from players. That is something that's kind of adjustable. There are some core things that are not too adjustable on a moment's notice, and so we had to wait about a week before we decided to make a move on it because we wanted to make sure we fully encapsulated player feedback. For example, Zen of Shields, Zen of Energy, right? Those changes were made as a result of player feedback. Originally, we had them giving like 5% shield bank and 2% energy shield regen on Zen of Shields, and 2% energy bank and 1% energy regen on Zen of Energy. We did this specifically because we believed that it was important for players to reach a similar level of tankiness on live. And when I say tankiness, I mean effective shields, as they have on live on test. We realized that the way we went about doing that was prohibitive in the sense that players felt that there was an intense need to level as fast as they could. And since there are a lot of players who have a lot of different characters that they have access to, that meant they needed to find an efficient way to get as many levels as they could on all of those characters. This resulted in some leveling that we didn't really want to happen, and instead of knee-jerk removing that leveling, we decided that it was more important to like devalue the need to get those levels. We wanted to fight against that. If a player feels like they need to act in a particular way that we don't think is like good for the game, we need to make adjustments to the game if that behavior is actually being incentivized. So that's the method that we took to adjust and address that situation.
To jump in real quick, basically, if we set up the game in a way that you're feeling forced to rush to level 7K, 9K, 12K, then that's our bad, and we want to change the way the game is set up so it's no longer forcing you to do that or effectively forcing you to do it.
Yeah.
We do want to give people perks for putting in that extra effort and leveling really high, but I think the conclusion we came to was Zen of Shielding is not it. So yes, you will, since we are nerfing it and putting the power onto the items itself, you will still get a nice little perk for maxing Zen of Shielding, but it's not going to be the way it was before, because we did the math a few days ago and we were like, oh man, between level 50 and level 100 of this skill, it's like such a huge difference in shield bank that it's not even fair for a new player. Let's say we nerf subspace AFK leveling or something. New player comes in and isn't able to find the same kind of efficient leveling. They're going to have a hard time competing with people who did level like that.
Yep. Okay. Before I continue on, because I don't want to ignore what's going on in the chat, Tobal, you're asking a question about AUG resets earlier. When is the AUG reset for all ships happening? I don't know actually. Hank, do you have any idea?
Yeah, it's trivial for us to give that because we did agree based on feedback from the last town hall I participated in to do a full non-neurobound AUG reset bonus to all characters. We already have such things on Shadow, so it's really just a matter of somebody whipping up the mission. It will go live with the rebalance when the rebalance finally goes live.
Yes.
Not sooner. Obviously, there's no reason for it to go live sooner than that.
Yes.
As to the other resolution we had, which is independent of this project but related thematically, we did also agree to start providing a non-bankable once per character per uni neurobound AUG reset, and I fully intend to have that available when this project goes live as well. Probably not sooner. I don't know that it would be necessary, but that's not relating to the actual project. It's just a related like dev operation.
Yep. Okay, another one. Tobal asked a question about being forced to play in a certain way. I don't understand what you mean by that, Tobal. Do you have any? Can you clarify, please? Okay, he's typing in chat. Bank setups seem to be the go-to now. So
I've actually heard that some people are playing regen setups.
Yeah, something
on test, I mean.
Yeah, something I've found is that regen in combat. Well, there is regen in combat actually. Just because Tobal is saying no regen in combat kind of kills that. Yes, regen in combat is significantly lower if you prioritize the biggest bank you can get, right? And that is kind of the intention. Something that we've done on the test server, I don't know if you've realized or noticed this, the regeneration of shields has gone up pretty significantly. When we reopen it, you'll see that we realize that expecting people to have the Zen of Shields skill and having a high regen from the shield charges that they have access to, right, on live out in combat, you kind of need some level of regen. You need it to be strengthened such that it would be even worth using it in the game. So yes, while you're saying like regen setups give you less regen in combat than they do out of combat, like or than a charger would give you out of combat. Yes, that is true. But giving the amount of regen that you would get out of combat in combat would be kind of ridiculous. I don't think that it's true to say that the regen is garbage in combat, because people have found the exact opposite to be true for some of their situations.
I guess, I mean, we are hoping that we gain clarity from the players as to what sort of metas you all are finding on the test server. Obviously, we have our own ideas about what kind of metas our work will engender. And I don't mean to dismiss Tobal's comment that from their perspective, bank setups seem to be the meta. It's just that we also have heard from other players that regen setups are apparently the meta. So it sounds to me like we need more investigation on this matter. And definitely, we are not trying to create one tiny rigid meta around, let's
Exactly.
say, bank setups. That's not
Exactly.
our intention. And if that is what we coalesce around, if that appears to be the true optimal way to play in the new project, we will make changes to avoid that.
I think you can easily go either way based on the testing I've done so far. I think you have the option, assuming Zen of Shields or some sort of balances in place on the regen of Shields.
That's good to know. Yeah, we definitely need more information on what kind of optimization the players are finding during their testing.
Especially knowing that a lot of bosses are doing less damage now, right? I mean, that needs to be taken into account as well. Things are going to be hitting quite as hard as they do now.
Right, and that as Hober gestured to, that was definitely one of the early thoughts we had in terms of making healing 1-to-1. We also wanted to make sure that you don't need to have hyper tanks anymore in order to do most content. Since it just seemed like we were really forcing berserkers to build a really specific kind of ship that
Yeah.
isn't necessarily that fun.
Yeah, the meta on live is kind of forcing a particular play style for particular classes, and we don't really want to continue to engage with that in the same way.
Yeah, we're trying to kind of strike this balance where each class does feel special in its own way, so it does have a variety of play styles that feel unique to it, and yet we're not pigeonholing people into a one rigid style that might not be very enjoyable. So it is a balancing act.
I think the concept of armor is going to be a good step in that direction. I think the fine tuning of how much HPS versus regen is necessary to keep up with some of the damage for tanks are still going to be a item we have to test a little bit further. I mean, lowering resistance is effectively, and not knowing how much bosses are hitting for, it's kind of tough to gauge things like that. But I do understand the concept.
Yeah. So Zen was. Oh, go ahead, Anki. You were
I was
going to
just saying,
respond.
and yeah, obviously, like I said to Ren Guest earlier about your typical AI balance, we're very
You cut out, Hank. Oh, he's not even here anymore.
He fell off.
Okay. Anyway, he probably fell off the bed or something. Yeah, we're really trying to make sure that AI balance is something that we are really responsive to during the actual testing session, right? Like we're not gonna just sit here and say, "Oh, you should just get better at the game," if people are telling us that they can't deal with a particular AI. Like we will go test it, we will get other people to test it, we'll look at it, and then if it turns out that they're not very good at the game, then we'll make some suggestions. But otherwise, we're really going to be responsive to feedback about those types of things. I wanted to respond to Valtuda and Zen. So Valtuda is saying that the Tesla coil also incentivizes having a big energy bank and an external source of elect. That's a good point. That's something that we're going to have to fine tune, right? Like it may be that the Tesla coil as it exists is just too strong, right? And if it is too strong in certain situations, we will adjust it. If we determine that it's not too strong, we will adjust it too and let you know. Our goal is to make sure that we're very careful about what we put on live at the end of the day so that there's not lots of changes. We would rather wait a little while to put it on live than to just throw it on live and have to make quick changes every couple of weeks. Because, no one likes that. No one likes having the ground beneath their feet shifting constantly. Zen is saying people will still hypertank because they can instant scale for more loot, so they will. Well, Zen, I don't know what to say to that. If people want to instant scale in order to get more loot, and thus they will hyper tank in order to do that, that's a choice they're making for a very specific reason to get increased drop chances. We're not really trying to balance. Like I've said before, we don't we don't primarily focus on instant scaling when we're doing balancing. Like it is a thing we might consider sometimes, but we're not like balancing around instant scaling. When we're designing these classes, we're designing them with regularly scaled content in mind. Ink, you cut out when you were in the middle of saying something.
Yeah, apparently I got moved to the AFK channel. It happens.
Mm.
It sounds like you all, are on track, so I'll just keep listening.
Okay. Jirak is saying a comment on our ability to test things. The most valuable experiments and data you're going to get require you to limit the number of variables. If you change most of the equipment, many of the ships, the skills, and the mathematics behind what we're doing all at once, it's extremely difficult to analyze the effects of a specific change. Okay, this is good. Mind you, I want to let everyone know you can talk at any time if you want. You don't have to type everything. Um, I'll let Ink tackle this for sure, but I want to respond to what you said about a specific change. It's not that we're actually trying to make a specific change. Changing the way healing works, we realized early on, fundamentally changes a lot of the assumptions made when the content was designed and the setups and gear and class choices that players make. Like there are a lot of things that were just assumed to be the case when you can create extra shields, when you can heal for more damage than you take when you're healing. So it's not that we're trying to like get you to give us the give us your opinion or perspective on a specific change. We're trying to create a cohesive experience, and the experience itself is not really something that we can just say, okay, like tell us the differential between how it is on live versus how it is on tests, and then we'll fine tune these numbers. It's not really a numbers thing so much. It is like a, is this fun? Is this fair? Does this make you happy? Does this bring joy? You know, in a way that some of you might be familiar with. So that's where I'm coming from in regard to this. But I'll pass this on to Eng to see if he has anything else to say.
Yeah, and on the other hand, I want to own up, and I think that what Jirok says kind of gets to it. I want to recognize that we have um, we have set a pretty big task to those of you who have donated your time to try things out on the test server, and I want to recognize that making such a large change to so many things, and then asking you to just go see what you think about it, that's not a trivial matter at all. So we really appreciate the amount of detailed feedback you all have given us. And I do think that you're helping us move the project in the correct direction. So um, what are we going to do about the fact that making a bunch of changes just creates a big challenge for the tester? One thing we are doing is this. So we're iterating, right? So we had it open for a week. We made some spot changes that we could, but now we've paused the event so that we can actually take your feedback carefully into consideration and then bring it up again. So at the very least, we're now not trying to get you to test something while we're moving the goalposts. There is going to be a certain extent to which we just have to have a pretty large scope, because every way we cut it, if we want to do things like one-to-one healing and just flattening out resistances, there end up being a lot of changes. Many items get changed, many bosses have to get changed, and so on. A lot of skills. It's just a big project, and the smaller we could get the scope, the happier I would be. But this is the smallest we've gotten it so far. So I understand that it's just a difficult challenge no matter how you're approaching it, whether you're doing it analytically or if you're just doing it by testing stuff out. We're trying to keep the scope as small as we can, and we appreciate the amount of work you all have been doing to like sift through everything. And by iterating on this, after this first week, we're trying to make your lives a little bit more manageable, so you don't feel like you're constantly having to test something that's in flux.
Okay, I mean that makes sense.
Can I cut in with two questions, please?
Sure, always.
First, I have brought to attention repeatedly that the drone ops on the lower tech engineer ops does not seem to be adequate, does not seem to transfer enough AUG stats to the drones to make the drones equivalent to what they were before. And a big part of my frustration is I have been bringing this point and bringing this point and bringing this point, and it seems from my perspective that people are just waving it away, going, "Yeah, we don't care, we don't care, we don't care." Am I misunderstanding what is happening, or will there be an increase in drone ops on the lower tech engineer augmenters?
So I can answer this. So I'm gonna answer you directly first, and then I'm gonna get to the meat of what you're asking. Because there's something that you're asking that you didn't directly ask. There's like an implicit and explicit question. So the explicit question is drone ops going to be increased on the lower tech drones? I mean AUGs. Yes, I think I actually when I went through a bunch of the AUGs and did this change, right? Like when you look at the test server, they have bigger stats on those low tech engineer AUGs. So that's one thing. The second thing though is the implicit question you're asking, which is like you're saying that there's an expectation that engineer is stronger at the lower end than before, or sorry, not stronger, equivalent to live. I need to directly address that because when I talk to a significant portion of the player base, right, our original goal was to make engineer like achieve parity with live. That was the very first place that we started at. As we moved through these changes and as we did more and more analysis as to what was happening on live and also looked at what would needed to be done to even get engineer to that level of parity, we realized just how out of line engineer was in certain spots, in certain yeah, parity instead of parody. Thanks for the catch. uh, we realized what we need to do in order to achieve parity in engineer, and we took some time to think about, do we need to achieve parity? That is still an ongoing question. We will still be considering how powerful lower level engineers should be. I would say for now, the general feeling is that we do not need to make engineer in the future have as much raw number, raw sheet DPS as it has on live, as long as a low level engineer is able to complete content if they are gathering equipment and getting upgrades as they go along. So we're very much concerned with the lower level engineer experience. We're not as concerned with making it equivalent to engineer as it is on live.
Right. So
Okay.
linking back to Ren's earlier question about certain AI with Argon walls, exactly this. So Hober has made some changes to AUGs. We're gonna have to have another look and see whether that's improved the sheet DPS of low level NG. But when all is said and done, if engineered DPS is nerfed in the lower levels, as long as they can still progress through content in a reasonable fashion, we're still going to consider that a success. We're not holding ourselves to the standard of making low level engineer have exactly how much DPS as it does on live.
Okay, dokie. Second question then. I'm extremely confused by how ships were rebalanced with the removal of resistances. My understanding was on live, resistances, hull space, speed, etc., are shuffled back and forth within a power number. That is, a ship with very low resistances might have more hull or go faster, whereas a ship with lots of high resistances goes slower or has less hull. It appears to me, looking at tests, that when the resistances were removed from ships, this additional, whatever you want to call it, was not moved over to hull space and speed, even though in order to increase the armor back to its former levels, I now need to equip exceedingly large and heavy items onto the ship, where I would not have had to equip any item at all previously. Am I misunderstanding what happened? Was the power formerly allocated to resistance moved over to hull and speed? And
No.
if not, why was it not?
So I can
We
directly
rewrote
answer
the
this.
formula. All
Yeah.
right, go ahead, Hober.
So on live right now, it doesn't work the way that you think it works. Primarily because there was some ignoring of numbers. right? So the straight up truth is that it doesn't work the way that you think it works. That's how we're making it work. The way that you described it working on live, that's the system we're moving towards, actually. We're moving towards a points based system, if that's what you want to call it, where you have to make trade offs when you're designing a ship from the developer's perspective. One day we may even talk about what the balance sheets look like and show you, what it looks like to do that. I don't know when that day will be, but that's something that I'm interested in doing. But the long and short of it is that the reason why we did not buff the other stats on the ship as a result of taking the armor off is because the overall strength of the ship is not just um, it's not just like the stats of the ship, it's also the gear that you have. And so taking the armor off, taking the resistances off while applying armor to some ships, but also at the exact same time giving a buff to shield bank and other stats, or sorry, not other stats, but other item types, will result in a net buff in some situations, or at least if not a buff, then at least some level of equity will be released, will be reached, right? We still have more work to do when it comes to the ship balance sheet. So there's still some things that are not done. You can expect the stats on ships to change, Rengast.
Right. The one thing you shouldn't be looking for is to understand, like mathematically, how a ship on live is considered equivalent to its version on test, because really the sheet has been redesigned in that respect. So there's not supposed to be any kind of power equivalence there. It's much more a holistic matter because of all the other concurrent changes to mitigation, shields, Zenith shields, etc.
That's a good follow-up question on that point, just reflecting a couple of ships in particular.
Yeah.
I think that's why capital ships got fucked so hard when they're, bigger, beefier, and more fucking outfitted than heavy fighters.
Let's have the other person ask their question first.
I guess my question was sort of specifically looking at some of the Tech 21, 22 capital ships. It's been said previously that capital ships have a base armor value of 25, but there's a few of them that just have higher values when that doesn't correspond to when they previously had higher resistances. Specifically looking at the Pax Corona and Hybridex Corona, they have some very high armor value on test where they had very low resist values on live. And I'm just wondering whether there's a specific rebalance that was intentionally making the ship stronger, or whether there's something else I'm misunderstanding about that, because it looks like none of the other stats changed. It just got moved from a low resist ship to a high resist ship.
So I have a direct answer for that again. When the dev who was putting those ships into the new system did that, those ships did not get moved to the new sheet. We didn't do that because at first we didn't want to make too many, we didn't want to make really broad sweeping changes, right? That was something we were trying to avoid. So what you saw and see on the test server right now is us trying to tiptoe around and do little changes, but making changes to things like armor as was necessary. So that's preliminary changes to capital ships. This is not how they're going to be once they move into the new balance sheet. There will be some there will be credence paid to the fact that different capital ships have different styles, or have different stat distributions or different uses, and we'll factor that in when we give them things like armor bonuses or weaknesses or niche roles, if that makes any sense. I'm definitely going to be respectful of the fact that the Pax Corone, probably doesn't really have too much of a reason to have the most armor out of all the other capital ships, right? I'm right there with you on that. This is preliminary when it comes to capital ships, and we will be moving to a world where that's not the case for the Corone, for example.
Just to finally clarify my understanding on that, can I then understand that basically a number of the ship stats were essentially manually put in right now and not using a balance sheet, and that will be corrected in the future to make them more level?
So when they were moved over, they were manually put in. However, this was, how should I put it? They weren't even moved. Yes, it was left in the old balance sheet, and they weren't moved into the new one. That's all.
Yeah. So I want to actually just mention here, obviously, like I said before, we have been trying to prevent the scope from cascading too much, and this was an example of that, where you're trying to not disrupt your game as much. But frankly, after getting some early feedback from players, we realized maybe we better just get all the ships into the new balance sheet, and that would ultimately make everyone's lives easier. So that's why you kind of caught us halfway here, where we had been doing what we thought would be easier for you all, but it ends up not being that way. So one of the big reasons why we do want to pause the event is to give Hober the time to actually get all the remaining non-support freighters into the new balance sheet. And then I'm sure that there's not going to be any more concerns when it comes to the Pax Corone armor, which is going to get ironed out.
Can I get a question?
Who was the next individual who wanted to talk about capital
It was
ships?
Alexander Anderson.
Oh, I got a turn now.
Yes, sir. I just wanted to give the other person a chance.
So I was wondering why, like, you know, like fucking, like, for example, like the Tech 22, you know, I was looking at the armor values and I was like, what the fuck? This is a capital ship? Like, I kind of felt like, I don't know how to explain it. Fucking, it just didn't feel right for something that's meant to be like a main ship of like a fleet, for example, to be so underwhelmingly armored.
I understand. We will be doing some more thought. Like even the amount of armor that ships have is something that we may, if it becomes necessary, we may really think about adjusting. Like this stuff that you bring to us, even if I just want to say this actually right now. When I do come into a feedback channel and I challenge you on the feedback that you give me, I'm not trying to tell you that I don't want to hear it. I'm not trying to tell you that you're wrong. I'm trying to get deeper, right? A lot of the feedback that you give me is based on your personal experiences, but sometimes when you give it to me, you tell me things that are from a player perspective, and I'm trying to like figure out how to interpret that as a dev. And so I'll ask questions that seem, quite frankly, like I understand, like they seem like I'm dismissing what you're saying, or I'm only focusing on one thing, but that's because I'm trying to get a better understanding of it. So we will definitely be keeping that in mind about everything, not just the armor on capital ships, right? As many things as we can. Maybe not one-to-one healing, but just about everything.
So let's just say this, Alexander Anderson, if you're willing to give us the time to complete the transfer of all the ships into the new hull sheet, which would affect capital ships for one thing, then maybe you can have another look once the testing event goes up again. And the type of feedback would be really helpful for us is if you're flying around in your capital ship characters, if you can tell us objectively, like, I don't feel tanky enough, I just feel like I don't have enough armor, and this is the situation where it's happening, that will help us really laser in on that situation and figure out if we want to change it.
You said something that perked my ears up. Are we finally moving to a single uniform ship sheet?
Yes, Rengas, that is what we're moving to.
Okay, so capital ships will now have the same power level as all the other ships do. They're not going to mysteriously get like 5 augs worth of stats when other ships only have like 2 or 3 augs on them.
It's not going to work the way that you're describing
Yeah, I
it.
was about to say, right, gas.
Yeah, it's not going to work the way you're describing it. We will be assigning niche values to the different ship types, and then we will figure out like how valuable that should be in relation to the other ship types. But like all of the ships will follow that theme of being valued in relation to each other.
Weren't there a few other individuals who spoke up in voice?
Yes, there were.
Yeah, I was one of them. I'm Vic, Vicious One / Pothos. I just returned. I guess you can consider me a vet. I want to come back to the game, and I'm late to this meeting, by the way. But I just want to know for myself and some friends that want to come back and play. What's the time frame on all of this? Do I have months? Are we looking at like 6 months, weeks? Should I follow what's the current trend right now and try and catch up, or is it like, is this right around the corner? Kind of a change.
I can take that one. So when we put the testing event up last week, so a week ago, the amount of time we initially committed to for the testing event was 4 weeks. Now, the first week we got so much feedback, we may end up needing to take longer than that, but I think I really want to get this out.
You don't have to give me like a
well, yeah, like. So it would be an overreach for me to tell you exactly when I think this is going to go live, simply because we can see how much more work we have to do. But as basically managing projects of the dev team in my capacity, I don't want to see this waiting longer, like till the end of the universe, for example.
Oh, definitely not.
The next reset starts October. First week of October or so is the next reset. There's no part of my mind that imagines this would drag on longer than that. But really, I'm wanting to see this thing turned out in August. I believe we can do it. Maybe we can even stick to that original 4-week deadline, which would give us 3 more weeks. But in any event, this is not a 6-month project.
Yeah.
We spent
That
a long
is
time working
that
on it,
is
and the fact that we're doing this testing event now and really accelerating and just really working on all the issues, just it's the final sprint.
Gotcha.
So I
Yeah,
want
that
to.
is way more specific than anything I think I've ever heard in the 12 years I've played Star
Yeah,
Citizen.
and the reason I'm confident in giving you that specificity and like kind of putting my name on the line is that we do have a very much higher performing dev team, a much more cohesive and efficient dev team than we ever have had before. And so I'm kind of basically giving a vote of confidence to my team members. Hober above all, because of all the work he's been doing on this project, that we can really turn that out. If not in the next 3 weeks, really sometime in August.
So I just want to respond to what Tired Bob said about rushing this is just a bad idea. I think if this meeting right here or this public forum isn't showing it, I'll do whatever is needed to show you that we're not rushing this. We are very much trying to take our time. We didn't really. Well, how should I put it? I don't know if in SS's entire history, there's ever been like a month-long intensive, like pre-planned testing period where we say, hey, bring us everything that you think is a problem with what we're doing, and we're going to take it back to the lab, remix the formulas, and come back out with something to get your feedback on. So I just want to say, like, we have no intention of rushing this. When Enk is giving these timelines, this is the best case scenario timeline. It's not like, this is not that we're going to follow this timeline no matter what. We're going to follow this deadline no matter what. This is like,
The
go ahead.
timeline doesn't come first and then we force ourselves to follow it. This is me telling you, based on how the first week has gone, based on my assessment of the team's capacity and what I think we can accomplish. This is how I believe that it's going to go. And just to give an example of how hard we've been working on this, as you all know, I'm not paid by Star Sonata. I worked more than 40 hours a week for the 2 weeks after Steam, and I worked about 30 hours this week. And a lot of that has been in supporting the operations of the team to make sure we keep our capacity up and we're able to be efficient. So we are really putting a lot of time on the line, most of which is not compensated, to make this project go.
It's a project of love and passion.
And in case you don't know, I do have a full-time job on top of this. So
As do I.
We're really hustling.
Appreciate the effort, guys.
It was a moment of silence, so I suppose I can slip a question in. SS has this interesting trend of having sort of off-meta ships, so what I guess were supposed to be off-meta ships, but maybe ended up being meta ships that break the mold sort of the whole type, right? So capital ships in general have 2 augmenter slots, but then you have something like the Paxium battle frigate,
I
which
hate
is
that
3.
ship.
Go on.
Is the plan to... So these ships are problematic, in my experience. Whenever there's a ship from a whole class that has more augs than a whole class should have, it tends to be very, very strong. My question is, do you intend to keep making ships like that, and do you intend to keep the ships that are breaking the mold in this manner around?
Let me say something
go
on that
ahead.
one, okay, Hober? So it's the question of extra AUG slots and exactly how much an AUG slot is worth has really been a sticky matter for us. So like we put some pretty decent like brain power on this question. I know that I've thought about it, Ingen has worked on it, and we've tried to really quantify in the balance sheets how much an extra AUG is worth. And whichever way we've sliced it, it's always come in a little lower than we expected. And I think the X factor there is the stat mix, the stat distribution that players are able to kind of use in their optimization. So I think we do lag a little bit in having a good way of quantifying just how powerful an extra AUG slot is. But the proof's sort of in the pudding. We have seen how whenever ships get an extra AUG slot or 2 or 3, in the case of the Battlesphere originally, that
the fucking the prawn. There you go.
Yeah, it's not been a good situation. It's been very difficult to balance. So I just wanted to give that background in terms of the theory crafting that we've done internally. We have struggled with coming up with a robust metric for the power of an extra AUG slot, and that is a problem. So, what were you going to say, Hober?
I was just going to say that if we can find a way to keep ships with extra AUG slots, I think we will. They're kind of cool, but if they continue to be a distorting influence on the game, I don't think we're going to end up keeping them. That's basically what I was going to say. Like if we can find a way to do it, we will, but I don't know what that way is. And Enkin and Jen and others have been trying to figure it out, but as he said, it's really difficult.
Well, but also, for example, the PBF, for an example, it has 100% less shield compared to the Dread. So you have to make that up with an AUG in comparison to make
Right.
it equally in the shield, just for the shield. And it's like 100% less in energy as well.
Yeah, but at the
Right,
exact
and
same time.
what I was
If
saying
I'm
too,
not bad, minus like 20 rate of, or like 50 rate of fire, I think it is, or something retarded for that.
No,
what I was
it's
saying to the stat distribution point is that sometimes players figure out, okay, how am I going to use this ship so I don't miss those stats, and I just give myself more deeps, something like that, right? So players are very clever in arranging their AUGs and working around the negatives that we impose on the ships, and it may get to the point that we just can't figure out how to balance a ship like that. So yeah, that is something we were thinking about, Jirok.
Okay. I mean, they're just problematic. That's why I bring it up. Like, the PBF
Yeah.
mathematically is a problematic ship.
Sucks. My lions do more damage.
It's also boring to not have many choices, right? It's not exciting or fun to play around.
Am I allowed to make a suggestion here? Because I said something earlier, and I don't think you understood what I was saying.
All right, let's have another crack at it then.
When I say, can we have a single uniform balance sheet for all ships? The capital ships have a ton of power on them in all of those AUG stats. And what has occurred to me is that if the other ship classes had the same amount of power available, people really wouldn't care about a third or fourth augmenter if the ship already had a third or fourth augmenter's worth of stats on it the same way most capital ships did.
So Ren, I want to close that particular conversation in this meeting, not because I don't find it interesting, quite the contrary, but just because I have one answer to it. I don't think you'll accept it, but I would like for you to just let it be. And my answer is this. As I was just saying to Jirok, we actually, I have a PhD in mathematics, and I don't know how to tell you the value of an extra AUG slot. The formulas I have come up with are not borne out by our empirical data. So that means the entire presumption of the existence of a robust metric of ship power is not founded. There may be such a metric, but we don't have it in our hands. And so until we do, that's kind of like the underlying premise of your entire question. So this is why I don't want to discuss it further right now.
Can I just bring up a follow-up to Rengues's earlier comment about low-level drones?
Sure.
One of the things I was finding just sort of theory crafting around the low-level drone setups is the problem is without the ability to have substantial AUG stats going to drones, the low levels lose the ability to customize that you seem to be intentionally trying to add to high-level drones. So it sort of ends up being an entirely different game for them at low levels, where they're stuck with more or less the base standard drones rather than customized drones, whereas all other classes are able to customize their ship setups with augmenters the way they wish. And it feels to me like that's a bit of a conceptual problem right now. Not so much a raw stats issue. I'm not saying the drones need to be stronger. It's just that it feels like they need to be able to have that similar sort of customization that other classes have, which requires substantial AUG setups, AUG stats to transfer to drones. And I mean, one of the ways that this is a problem is the fact that so much of the drone stat is coming from drone deployment skills. So if you have 22 drone deployment, you get 22% of the stats over, and you obviously don't have that at low levels. So it may not be so much an AUG balance issue versus just the concept of how that changes with levels.
I mean, baseline you get 25 drone ops just from engineer, and if you deploy 6 drones, your drones as a whole have, when you add it all up, 150% of your AUG stats.
It's it's a really interesting point.
That's very
Uh,
iffy because that's 25 each drone, though. I see where he's
Okay.
coming from, and I was an
No.
engineer for many years.
Let me point this out. I think so. Earthkeeper, I think, was speaking. I took a glance at the screen. It's a very interesting concept point, and there's a parallel universe in which we just gave everybody 100 drone ops and called it good. We opted for a system where drone ops is a stat you have to optimize for as an engineer. We did quite a bit of analysis on this to figure out what the balance points were with that. And a concession that we make there is that in the early game, when drone ops is more scarce, it's like you say. So since we did make that design decision, I want to see if we can make it work without really just having to mess up with a bunch of other stuff. So, for example, would it help if lower tech engineer had some more drone options?
Actually, with drone ops, is it possible to just move drone ops off of weighting entirely and say, this is a drone AUG, it's a drone-focused drone AUG, so it gets X amount of ops, regardless of tech level? Like, drone-focused drone AUGs get 30%, ship-focused drone AUGs get 15%, or something like that. Doesn't matter what tech, because it's flat 100 all the way up. Capped at flat 100 all the way up.
That precludes you from having setups with one drone ops AUG, though.
Well, I'm not saying just 15 and 30, but if you mark something as a drone AUG, then it's either a ship focused drone AUG or a drone focused drone AUG. Ship focused drone AUGs get less drone ops, and the drone ops amount on a ship focused drone AUG do not change tech to tech. So your tech 5, your tech 10 offensive ops AUG has the same drone ops value as the tech 20 offensive drone ops AUG.
The thing is, we actually, so in spite of the fact that we don't know mathematically the right formulas for every kind of power, we do have relatively robust metrics on the power of the AUG mod drone ops versus other AUG mods. So the way it's set up right now should be pretty reasonable, even at the low tech. And so that's why I'm feeling like maybe if engineer is having some kind of problems in that area, it's an itemization problem, perhaps, not a theory problem with the drone ops AUG mod.
Make Primal Jungles great again.
Yeah. Well, again, I think back when we did the singles run, and maybe it was not like this on the PvP server again, the Primal Jungles kind of proved that engineer was a bit busted with all the resources they had at their disposal.
I remember the old engineer, because you got to remember, I was in a Pax Celestica for years.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
back when you had to worry about
terrifying engineer.
Yeah, I remember doing the
engineers were going to Coliseum, and Coliseum was engineer. That was
you could
it.
drop Titan drones off of Pax Celestica and so on.
Yeah.
I do notice that we're coming up on the hour mark, Hober. So what do you think? Are there other items we wanted to hit before we called it?
I think we've generally addressed what we ended up doing as a result of feedback. I guess a couple other little things I could point out. I mean, if it's useful, I guess I could say what we made changes to. But I think it's actually more useful to give them a sense for what we're trying to aim for. I think that's like a big picture, like where is Star Sonata going? Like why is this healing revamp happening? Because this ties into the class. This ties into the class stuff too.
So capital ships once again aren't even in the new
hull
shield yet.
Right now.
All right. All right. Yeah. So I mean, I think we have done some work in trying to articulate what our big vision is, why somebody like Hober or myself would be putting so many hours of our recreation time into this project, what we're trying to accomplish with all that. Hopefully that vision is coming across a bit. So yeah, we're trying to listen to your feedback. We're trying to respect your all time in not only testing the event, but also the time you just spend playing the game and trying to invest in your characters. that reminds me to mention, we definitely don't want to flip the whole concept of which gear is good, right? So yeah, there might be some items that weren't that great before and now are suddenly getting into meta, but I don't want you to feel like all of your hard-won, rare, exotic items are invalidated. That is never part of the plan, and it could be like that at a given moment on the test server as we try to make changes, but that's absolutely something we'd like to get feedback on. So for example, if you, like, let's say you're messing around and you try out a setup with like a bunch of Oli gear and it's better than your like tip top endgame setup on test server, please tell us about that. Tell us why it is you think that this kind of common or old gear is outperforming your exotic gear.
Well, then here's a question. Since we're on gear, for example, like the Gargantuan Yellow, like that thing was fucking massive. So I mean, I can understand why it gave such massive regeneration bonuses. But then you go and look at it now, and it's like, what, 500 something? It's literally less than a fucking Dark Cage and all this other shit. Like I understand they're exotics and whatnot, but getting the Gargantuan Yellow and let alone fitting it is a bitch in itself.
Yeah, maybe that item should be larger. 500 doesn't sound large enough to me for a gargantuan item.
Well, no, Gargantuan Yellow is like 700 size is what I'm saying, but it's only like 500 regen, whereas it used to be like 700 size and gave like 660 regen.
Okay. I think this might be part of it getting moved down a rarity tier, right? Isn't it green now?
Yep.
I can't remember fully. I just kind of looked at it at the time, and I was kind of like,
Yes,
what the fuck
it got moved
happened?
down.
So tell you what, we are trying to crack down on rarity
now.
tiers. So this is going to be like a 1-2 thing here. So the bad news is we do want to crack down on rarity tiers, because what we don't want is somebody makes an orange item that has no business being orange, and then everyone gets it in game. That just trivializes all the other hard work you've been doing. Yeah, I'm sure you're happy to get a more powerful item, but if it's really common, it's going to feel bad in the end. So we're really cracking down on the rarity conventions on the creation of new content. And as a consequence, we've had to go back and apply some rarity conventions on older content. That's the bad news. But in a way, it's also good because it means that you can be more secure when you obtain a really good orange item. You can have a stronger belief that it's going to stay good.
So then what would be considered orange? Like, because I know there's also, like, for example, like we were talking about the Olympus gear, like the Ares bloodstained, the Poseidon, hippos, all that crazy shit.
So I actually can answer your question, because we have on our dev server, we have a pin with the rarity tiers. Let me pull it up. So orange means it can be a 1% drop from an Uber, a proper Uber, at Tech 23.
Yeah.
At a Tech 23 level, which we aren't there yet, it should be worth about 1 trillion credits, not market, but actually cost to obtain. Or if it's built, it can be a very expensive build from a blue item on a 1-use BP.
Which then also leads into shit like, for example, the dark weapons, what is it, the flaming Urquan XCOM bullshit that deals surgical damage. It's like a fucking like 5-tier, 6-tier build stage of bullshit.
Yeah. So let me try and get to my other point though. So the kind of mixed / bad news is we are enforcing rarity tiers more to try to make it mean something. The good news is we are also developing, in the cases where like Gargantuan Yellow got knocked down to green, we actually have a blue upgrade version of it in development that it's going through the process right now. And if it's approved, that means that yes, your Gargantuan Yellow setup has been nerfed in the rarity tier change, but you will at least be able to upgrade it into a proper rare item, blue tier.
That's like a turn.
Again, that brings up the question, like, is it going to be even bigger? Because I mean, it's already fucking massive as is. Like,
we'll have to have a look at the proposal coming down the line. But the basic idea is where people's popular gear did get nerfed because we enforced a rarity tier reduction, we are trying to produce new items to fill those gaps that were created. So players do have an opportunity to upgrade into an item that has the more like stats they were accustomed to, but does have the appropriate cost and rarity. Somebody asked, is it a BP? Is it AC? Both ways are permitted. It would just depend on how the content dev develops it.
Yeah, and we're
Well,
always
that's at least slightly good news for once in the fucking dev team and news announcement.
yeah, we're always going over gear and thinking about where does this fit at. So for example, when you look at the Tech 22 versions of the combined weapons, you know, were the ones that build out of the Venusian, Mercurian, and Solarian gear, like the blossoms and stuff. Like,
Yeah.
we've noticed that the Tech 21 and the Tech 22 versions are not different enough, given how just incredibly.
Yeah, they really aren't. Like I
Yeah.
noticed that too. Like, don't get me wrong. Like one has more bullets. Yes, cool. But at the same time, I could just build the Tech 21 and still have just about almost the same raw DPS.
Yeah, so what we're gonna do is reevaluate it and see, does it fit in enough with the other items that would be exotic. Like, is it difficult enough to get and acquire that it makes sense to make it exotic? I'm leaning towards yes right now, but that's something that we have to make sure we're careful about, because as Enka said, we're really being intentional about the rarity tiers of things.
Because it really is a bummer if somebody goes through and makes an exotic item that's easy to get. That just trivializes everyone's hard work, right? Nobody likes that in the end. I do want to say, we recognize, and this is something I talk a lot with the other devs, especially Kalando, who is the community manager. We recognize that we are responsible to develop your trust, to gain your trust in the process, to the point where you see something on test server that you don't like. You don't have to hit the panic button. You don't have to like nuke Jeff's house from space. You can just DM somebody. You can just write a message like, "Hey, I saw this. This is throwing me off," and you can trust us that we will hear you and we aren't going to just like pull the rug out from under you. So I recognize this is something we do need to develop that trust. We have to gain your trust. That's part of the reason Hober and I take time out of our day to hold a meeting like this. And I've personally got a pretty good feeling from this meeting and just from the overall engagement we've been receiving from you all in the testing event. And we want to build from that success.
All right, so with that being said, I think we're going to wrap this up. We've gone a little bit over time. I don't want to spend everyone's time frivolously. Does anyone have any last minute quick questions that they want to ask in voice, they want on the record before we adjourn?
Can we make capital ships great again?
We'll try.
No, sorry.
I've got a comment. So with the rework to drones, it's now quite important to understand, at least from sort of the mathematical side of the game, what equipment is on a drone and what exactly the base stats of the drone are. And the current in-game display, I don't think is sufficient for that.
I agree with you.
So I guess, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I don't know if we'll ever get to what I would want. I would like for you to be able to see all the gear on the drone. I don't know if that's what we're going to do as a team, but I fully agree with you that being aware of everything that's on that drone is useful and important.
This actually reminded me, why did you guys change the fucking drones as like personal gear to like a singular like line of bullshit? Because like each drone was like really unique, you know, individualized, and now it's like I feel like a lot of them are kind of like, I don't know how to describe it properly, like more like fucking, you know, singular, linear, like they have like a curvature to them, but they're not like unique.
I would say we're not trying to make them all boring, but we did find that over time we weren't giving our devs enough tools to work with to create balanced drones. They just didn't have the tools at their disposal, and consequently we got some drones made that were really far out of line. And you all know which ones I'm talking about because those are the ones everyone likes to use on live. So we aren't
talking about the Tech 22.
Yeah, so listen, we're not trying to swing it too far to the level that it's all boring. We are trying to figure out a way where developers have enough tools at their disposal that they don't accidentally make bad drones or uber drones.
No, I feel that, but like for example, real quick, like going back to the Primal Jungle drones real quick, like they were great drones. Don't get me wrong. They could have, like, if you nerfed them just a little bit, they'd have been fucking, you know, like a good end to, like, you know, mid tier to like close to end drone, like long term for people to use. you know, like droners would have fucking loved you flat out. Like, and this is coming from like my droner experience over like almost 10 years plus.
Yeah. So it might be the case that where it is at right now is a little too nerfed or like a little too monotone. We have created new systems to try to like prevent drones from getting super overpowered, but it's still up for discussion. Especially if there's like a particular drone you feel has really lost its character, maybe there's something we can do about it. So just try to feed us that information. And to Jarok's point, let's talk in DM. Any information we would provide you to analyze the game, I would need it to also be just a public information. But to be sure, I want to recognize we do have some individuals in the community who have some really high level theory crafting chops, and to the extent we can help you help us, that might be a good arrangement. But I just want to be clear to everybody here that if I consult with any given player and pass them stats to help them study the game, that's never going to happen unless those stats are public knowledge.
And just to clarify my point, I'm advocating for the tooltip in the game to show that, which would be available to every player.
It would show the gear, but then you have to know the stats of the gear.
Well, the base, maybe just the stats of the drone then. Like right now it gives you like DPS and like DPE and some of the regen stuff. We need a bit more than that, I think. Like recoil, for example, and things like range, etc., you know?
The thing, I'm not sure if it can really be going in the client in a simple way, because the drone might have more than one weapon, and this tooltip starts getting very big.
Yeah, it's too much.
If you put it in the show stat sources, would it be okay? Because it's already like its own little pop-out window. We can just dump a bunch of info in there.
Potentially, since show stats window is just a big chunk of text, we could
Yeah.
put in or whatever we wanted.
Just load it in there. Should be fine.
Just a question of what we want and how much effort it's worth, right?
Jirok, if you want to DM me what you would consider like a MVP version of the information to be added to show stats, we can kind of process that internally.
Okay, sure. Thanks.
All right, Hober, do you want to call this meeting?
Yep, I think this is it. Thank you, everyone. We really appreciate your time. We'll be responding to everything you say in the feedback channels going forward. When the test event is ready to resume, there'll be a notification. I'll ping people, and we look forward to getting your feedback from it.
Also, when the fuck are we gonna get something cool for being around for so long, and now that we're finally on fucking Steam?
Something cool.
Like for all the
how
old
about-
players
how about,
returning
like,
and everything.
What about the
twice
skin
as many
blocking
pay to
in?
plays. Wow, Vasco da Gama, I haven't seen that name in a while.
That's what I mean. Like, dude, like all these old players are coming back. Like, I think the guys like fucking we're like, you know, since we're finally on Steam after, you know, soon TM, you know.
Not soon, TM.
I mean, all the people that I've seen who've come back, they've just been excited to be able to play the game with other people and kind of learn and not be at the very end game anymore, you know, like having to learn things. I don't think
Well,
there's
yeah, but that's different though. Like for like them, like you gotta remember, like all of us that have been here and like we've gone through this shit, and like we're still dealing with your shit personally. You know what I mean?
Like I've been saying, community is what makes this game. This game wouldn't be here all this time if we didn't have all the folks like yourself playing. I'll leave it to Jeff if he wants to think about any other kind of like rewards, but I think everyone's really excited about how well the Steam launch went, and there's just a lot of new players around and returners. So I've personally been really excited. I hope you are too.
Well,
just throw a holo projector at him.
One thing that I will say is there's some major structural difficulties that these changes are trying to address that make, at least for me specifically, boss fights difficult to create in a good way. And I think once we get this done, we are sort of poised to spit out a lot of really high quality content.
That's right.
Bosses are hard? Since when?
No, it's difficult for us to make
Design.
new fun.
Oh, okay. I was like,
So
I can understand
absolutely
that.
right. And I can also add to that in terms of our own dev team capacity, we actually have cultivated now a group of devs who can create really fun and nice looking bosses.
Well, I
So,
mean, if you want something that, like, you know, even though like I kind of like pseudo created it because Sharky asked me way back in the day, how would you nerf people from attacking people in the police galaxies? And I gave him an aura idea. That aura idea is that cancer that we have now.
yeah, that's the good days, the good old days.
So basically, you're to be punished every time I die from it because my bots, for some reason, want to shoot something in there.
It's pretty fucking much, like, cause like I forget what the fuck Sharky exactly asked me, but he asked me something, and I was like, make it along the line of the gamma emitter. You know, make it like, you know, reduce shields, reduce energy, just fuck them completely. Because I think this is when I was back on light commerce back in the day. And he was like, all right, that sounds pretty cool. And then like next thing I know, like within like a week later, fucking that aura was in existence, and I wanted to cry.
Wait, which aura?
The police aura, the fuzz one.
Well, so I guess Jeff had a good point though. Once we get this change in order and we get it to a place that's good, we should be able to produce a bunch of really fun new content, which is something I admit the game has been needing for a long
We
time.
can make some noob zones that we can just go back and explore.
Are we allowed to mention what's going on right now, or are we just keeping that hush hush?
I don't remember what has or hasn't been discussed and like reduced.
You've mentioned it.
Score,
You've mentioned it pretty publicly.
Yeah, we are working on a bunch of new world bosses that will roam in Calthi depths and should be pretty fun and challenging. And they will be associated with Tech 23. So
some new what that will roam Calthi
world bosses.
Oh.
Yeah, roaming bosses.
Like
oh, those are coming back finally?
I think Gurujana Ikam, except like awesome.
And hopefully not spamming up the chat like Timmy does.
So
Timmy, fucking Grinch.
We are working on producing basically a lot more roaming, big team fight content that you all can have a nice PvP about and get some cool loot, get some new Tech 23 skills and stuff. So that is something that we are actively working on right now.
Oh, also, I was wondering real quick, because that actually just reminded me because I'm healing somebody. So on live test or the test server, when you try to heal somebody who's at like, you know, lower shields than you and you're not in squad with them or whatever, you cannot at all. Like it physically denies you.
Does that sound right to you, Jeff?
Oh. What, you're trying to heal someone that has lower shields than you?
And
no, like someone has like, you know, like they just warp into a galaxy and like say like I'm just sitting there on my shield monkey and soul. And, you know, they just go flying by and fucking, I start trying to heal them, and it's just like, nah, you're not in squad with them, and this would, you know, be a hostile action. I'm like, but,
no. Yeah, that's because of the healing hostilities, because there's someone in the galaxy who hates them, so if you healed them, you would get hostility to that person. If you take your target lock, you can, safety lock off, you can heal, but you don't know where you might, like, fly through an EF galaxy and all the bases shoot you all of a sudden, and that would be why.
Okay. No, that's literally just something I was like, I'm not sure if that was like a feature or like it was accidental.
It's for your protection.
Yeah, we're trying to prevent people from having off-team healers, and just.
I figured as much. I just didn't want to like just assume. That's why I was like, oh shit, I have a chance to ask, and I just realized it clicked in my brain.
Okay. So I do think we better start wrapping this one up.
Yep.
To respect everyone's time.
Let's do it.
All right.
Thanks, everyone. Ending the recording now.
For running. Yeah.
Got it.